inexpensive phones continue to impress. A philosophical question to keep in the back of your brain as we go through this review: what do you really use your phone for? Over the last couple years, one of the segments of phones that has been most exciting to watch has been this mid-range, especially the lower mid-range. Phones from 200 to 400-ish dollars. There have always been some good bargains to be found, but often they'd come with a lot of caveats. This is the right phone for you if you can handle these compromises, blah, 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 blah. The Infinix Note 10 joins a list of phones I've been digging for their hardware value. Increasingly, it's the more affordable phones out there that offer the most complete consumer hardware package. So, not to read the spec sheet at you, I figure you can go to GSM Arena, but headphone jack, power button fingerprint sensor, stereo speakers, a 90 hertz display, a 64 megapixel camera, 33 watt fast charging, dual SIM, and a memory card slot, UFS storage, and a big ol' hunkin' battery. This is really hot territory right now against TCLs and Nords, Xiaomi, and Motos, where we can find hardware-rich options undercutting the price of iPhone SEs and Pixel 4a's. The Note 10 Pro makes some charming design decisions. A camera module that looks somewhat Samsung inspired, but with a two-tone back that looks a little like a Pixel, and on a color and texture which reminds me of Huawei and Honor phones. Sort of an evolutionary mutt of cell phone design, but still looks pretty good. Regardless, there's a plastic bumper in the box. You're probably going to put your phone in a case, especially a phone this big, because this is a big chunk. It's even just a little bit bigger than my LG V60. But the expectation for this phone in the manufacturer lineup, this is the big, powerful gaming and work phone. And it handles those duties surprisingly well. The MediaTek SoC is wonderfully capable. CPU performance just slightly ahead of the mid-range 700 series solutions from Qualcomm. GPU performance just slightly behind a powerhouse chip like the Snapdragon 855. This is the ballpark where we were with the T-Mobile variation of the LG Velvet last year. And the Velvet sold for quite a bit more. And folks review premium tier $1,000 phones, but only talk about average consumers. This is the kind of phone which easily handles that kind of use, and in many ways is still a little overkill for average. Battery life has been phenomenal, which shouldn't be much of a surprise given the mid-range SoC and the huge battery. I think a goodly chunk of consumers would happily give up some compute power if they knew they'd get more runtime out in the field. And 30-watt fast charging is still pretty quick by today's standards. You're not left out for long when you need a top off. But this is another phone I'd recommend getting in the habit of not charging it overnight, especially if you're using the fast charger regularly. Considering the price tier, I'm not too concerned about the lack of wireless charging or having an IP rating. Cable charging is faster, it's more efficient, it puts less wear on the battery, and doesn't require additional, more expensive pads that you'll need to buy. And the phone seems to be built with a decent level of splash resistance, so the IP rating, that would bring some peace of mind, but I see no reason to fear a little spill or using this phone out in some light rain. The audio game is respectable for this tier of phone. Stereo speakers, which are good for arm's length options, if just falling short of the power and quality that you'd want if you were trying to replace a small Bluetooth speaker to fill a small room with some good sound. The tuning is a little lean. For phone speakers, I could do with just a bit more low end, but I wouldn't say that's a serious fault, where these speakers still handily keep with and outperform a lot of cheaper laptops out there. The headphone jack is a solid convenience port. You get good audio numbers, though it obviously does not deliver audiophile grade output. And the amp is kind of weak. I'm honestly, I'm just not sure how much I should be worried about those people who want to use headphones that cost as much or more than this phone on this phone. I honestly don't know how many of those people really exist. And the camera performance is another area where this price shows us how far we've come But it's also not difficult finding more expensive phones that perform better. If your frame of reference is Google Pixel processing, then some of the shots that come out of this will probably disappoint, but you'll spend more on a Pixel. The flip side, this hardware affords some physical advantages over Pixels and iPhones. The casual point and shoot stuff is handled really well, if it's a bit goofy sometimes on the HDR processing. But there are manual control options for folks who want to drive this main camera just a little bit harder. The complementing cameras are of varying utility. The 2 megapixel monochrome is becoming more common for contrast and low light performance. Plus, to top it all off, we get perfectly usable 4K video. Again, these mid-ranger options with memory card slots, it's pretty nice to have the extra storage when you're shooting 4K video. And just as a snarky dig to a number of other manufacturers out there, there's no reason premium tier phones should lack 4K selfie video. This phone shoots 4K video from the front camera. I've been glowing on this hardware because it's pretty much all good. I can't find any tragic missteps, any serious deal breakers. The concerns on a phone like this will more likely come down to software and support. As an English speaker, I do think it's cute finding a few of those little English typos throughout the UI, but I was happy to be greeted by a fairly substantial update for system performance, and we're not too far out of date on the security patching. I would highly recommend people more regularly check out their Play Services updates. I went through 4 reboots getting the phone set up to get the OS and the security patching and the Play Services all up to date. Increasingly, this is where we're going to see more security patching happening anyway, so it's about time we get a bit more familiar with how to get those updates done. From there, it's mostly just personal preference stuff. The skin has some fun additions, like a security filter cribbed from a BlackBerry. There's a quick toggle pane where you can dock some shortcuts and you've got access to things like screenshots and cropping. The general aesthetic is bouncy without being quite as playful as Xiaomi's skin. It's like the interior trim on a car. You get to pick and choose the feel you like. Maybe the only part I just can't quite get behind is the app drawer. The good is I get my perfectly vertical notification shade and app drawer. It's all one vertical column. The irritating part is when I try to swipe down to close the app drawer, I get this additional wallpaper and app panel that I can't close through a similar swipe. I can't find a setting to disable this, but it drives me nuts. I really don't like having to hit the home button twice to get out of it. But it's on that software point that we can start wrapping this up. These types of options, they're hardware rich, but low cost. We can build some expectations that software support will likely be on the shorter side. And this brings up one of the main choices facing consumers in this tier. We have a high threshold for Pixel and iPhone updates. We expect more out of Google and Apple. Those phones cost a lot more and lack some of the hardware options people might want to play with. So it's not as simple as picking updates as the deal breaker. How dare someone want to own a bigger, nicer looking phone with fun features? The conversation needs to balance all the pros and cons and not just cherry pick one way a phone might lose in a comparison when we're not really comparing, we're supposed to be reviewing. It's not about picking winners or losers based on one feature. It should be more like Pokemon or Transformer power stats, varying degrees of good and gooder. Maybe my last parting criticism, I just wish this wasn't called a Note 10. Yeah, balancing price and performance. My biggest issue with the phone is probably its name. I feel there are other things we could call phones, especially when they don't have any kind of built-in stylus support. I'll of course leave some links down below where you can find more info on the Infinix Note 10 Pro. See if it's available in your region. I'm always going to be happy to see more affordable smartphone competition, and this is a solid entry in that category. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, and subscribing to the channel. Supporting your favorite content creator, never been more critical. So I greatly appreciate those of you who are checking out the links down below. Maybe you're shopping a little merch. That kind of stuff really does help keep production rolling on this channel. You can catch a full list of all my affiliates and partnerships on SomeGadgetGuy.com, or you might consider just maybe, joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list is basically the coolest collection of tech pals on the web, so I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters and the Twitch, not so much on the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and I will catch you all on the next review.